Once us again at 6:30. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the CBDC will end human freedom as we know it.
Yeah, so we're going to be referencing an article. I put a link down below. We're streaming live from our Rumble and our backup channel, and you can check out the article. It's a two-part article on the Off Guardian. We're going to be reviewing the first portion of the article. It's a rather long article. It has a really good analogy in it that I think will help a lot of this make sense. So I wanted to go over this with y'all, and let's jump right into the article. Central bank digital currency will end human freedom. Another reason why I think this is really important is we're starting to watch banks failures. Silicon Valley Bank just failed yesterday. There's going to be a trickle-down effect of that from other affected holdings at Silicon Valley Bank. There were some Ginkgo Bioworks is one of them that comes to mind. There was lots of corporations that held money there in the millions. So it's kind of interesting because FDIC only insures private individuals $250,000 per account. So, but there will be a bailout and all that good stuff as a part of this. So they'll print more money, and maybe instead of sending it to the Ukraine this time, they'll give it to the technocratic oligarchy that lords over us. But central bank digital currency will end human freedom. Don't fall for the assurances of safeguards, the promises of anonymity, and of data protection. They are all deceptions and diversions to obscure the malevolent intent behind the global rollout of central bank digital currency. It's the most comprehensive, far-reaching, authoritarian social control mechanism ever devised. Its interoperability will enable the CBDCs issued by various national central banks to be networked to form one centralized global CBDC surveillance and control system. Should we allow it to prevail, CBDC will deliver the global governance of humanity into the hands of bankers. CBDC is unlike any kind of money with which we are familiar. It is programmable, and smart contracts can be written into its code to control the terms and conditions of the transaction. Policy decisions and broader policy agendas restricting our lives as desired can be enforced using CBDC without any need of legislation. Democratic accountability, already a farcical concept, will be literally meaningless, as if the democratic process already isn't literally meaningless with the dog and pony puppet show that we have going on here in the technocratic oligarchy of the US of A. CBDC will enable genuinely unprecedented levels of surveillance, as every transaction we make will be monitored and controlled, not just the products, goods, and services we buy. Even the transaction we make with each other will be overseen by the central bankers of the global governance state. Data gathering will expand to encompass every aspect of our lives. This will allow central planners to engineer society precisely as the bankers wish. CBDC can and will be linked to our digital IDs and through CBDC wallets tied to our individual carbon credit accounts and job certificates. CBDC will limit our freedom to roam and enable our programmers to adjust our behavior if we stray from our designated technate function. The purpose of CBDC is to establish the tyranny of dictatorship. If we allow CBDC to become our only means of monetary exchange, it will be used to enslave us. This is why we continue to talk about parallel society, parallel economy, community. We must be developing our own community, a barter exchange of goods and resources. And we must also, that's why gold and silver is great as a modicum of exchange, as well as durable goods. Be under no illusion, CBDC is the end game. So what is money? Defining money isn't difficult, although economists and bankers like to give the impression that it is. Money can simply be defined as a commodity accepted by general consent as a medium of economic exchange. It is the medium in which prices and values are expressed. It circulates from person to person and country to country, facilitating trade, and it is the principal measure of wealth. Money is a medium, a paper note, a coin, a casino chip, a gold nugget, or a digital token, etc., that we agree to use in exchange transactions. It is worth whatever value we ascribe to it, and it is agreed value which makes it possible for us to use it to trade with one another. If its value is socially accepted by general consent, we can use it to buy goods and services in the wider economy. We could use anything we like as money, and we are perfectly capable of managing a monetary system voluntarily. The famous example of U.S. prisoners using tins of mackerel as money illustrates both how money functions and how it can be manipulated by the authorities if they control the issuance of it. Tins of mackerel are small and robust and can serve as perfect exchange tokens, currency that are easy to carry and store. When smoking was banned within the U.S. penal system, the prisoners' preferred currency, the cigarette, was initially taken out of circulation. As there was a steady, controlled supply of mackerel cans, with each prisoner allotted a maximum of 14 per week, the prisoners agreed to use the tin fish as the medium of economic exchange instead. The prisoners called in-date tins the EMAC, edible mackerel, as this had intrinsic utility value as food. Out-of-date fish didn't, but it was still valued solely as a medium of exchange. The inmates created an exchange rate of 4 inedible MMAX money mackerel to 3 EMAX. You could buy goods and services in the inmate-run market that were not available on the administrative-run market. Other prison populations adopted the same monetary system, thus enabling inmates to store value in the form of max. Now, this is what you call a parallel economy, and this is actually a parallel monicum of exchange. They could use their saved max in other prisons if they were transferred. Prisoners would accept payment in max for cooking pizza, mending clothes, cleaning cells, etc. These inmate service providers were effectively operating IRM businesses. The prisoners had voluntary structured a functioning economy and monetary system. Their main problem was that they were reliant upon a monetary policy authority, the U.S. Prison Administration, who issued their currency, MAX. This was done at a consistent inflationary rate, 14 tins per prisoner per week, meaning that the inflationary devaluation of the MAX was initially constant and therefore stable. It isn't clear if it was deliberate, but the prison authorities eventually left large quantities of EMAX and MMAX in communal areas, thereby vastly increasing the money supply. This destabilized the MAC, causing hyperinflation that destroyed its value. With a glut of MAX available, its purchasing power collapsed. Massive quantities were needed to buy a haircut, for example, thus rendering the IRM economy physically and economically impractical, if only temporarily. Wow, it kind of sounds like quantitative easing. Perfectly usable money. The banker's nightmare.
Fishy.
In June.
That
sounds fishy.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
In June 2022, as part of its annual report, the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, published the future monetary system. The central bank BIS members effectively highlighted their concerns about the potential for the decentralized finance, DeFi, common in the cryptoverse, to undermine their authority as the issuers of money. DeFi seeks to replicate conventional financial services within the crypto universe. These services are enabled by innovations such as programmability and composability on permissionless blockchains. The BIS defined DeFi as a set of activities across financial services built on permissions, distributed ledger technology, such as blockchains. The key issue for the central bankers was permissionless. If it pleases the crown, might I issue a Bitcoin? That is the problem. They don't have the control of it, and therefore they can't control it, i.e., they also cannot tax it. Now, that's a no-no. That's a boo-boo. Both the users and the nodes that validate the transactions on the permissionless blockchain network are anonymous. That's another no-no. You can't be anonymous. You can't have anonymity. You must be tracked and traced. It must be a total panopticon. The network distributed nodes performed cryptographic checksums to validate transactions, each seeking to enter the next block in the chain in return for an issuance of cryptocurrency, i.e., mining. That's how the mining process works. This means that the anonymous, if they wish, users of the cryptocurrency can be confident that transactions can be recorded and validated without any need of a bank. Regardless of what you think about cryptocurrency, it is not the innumerable coins and modes of money in the crypto universe that concerns the BIS or its central bank member. It is the underpinning permissionless DLT, threatening their ability to maintain financial and economic control that preoccupies them. The BIS more or less admits this. Crypto has its origin in Bitcoin, which introduced a radical idea, a decentralized means of transferring value on a permissionless blockchain. Any participant can act as a validating node and take part in the validation of transactions on a public ledger, i.e., permissionless blockchain. Rather than relying on trusted intermediaries such as banks, record keeping on the blockchain is performed by a multitude of anonymous, self-interested validators. Many will argue that Bitcoin was a creation of the deep state, perhaps to lay the foundation for CBDC, or at least provide the claim justification for it. Although the fact that this is one conspiracy theory that the mainstream media is willing to entertain might give us pause for thought. Interesting though this debate may be, it is an aside because it is not Bitcoin nor any other crypto asset constructed upon any permissionless DLT that threatens human freedom. The proposed models of CBDC most certainly do. CBDC and the end of split circuit IMFS. Central banks are private corporations like the Federal Reserve, just as commercial banks are. As we bank with commercial banks, so commercial banks bank with central banks. We are told that central banks have something to do with government, but that is a myth. Today, we use fiat currency as money. Commercial banks create this money out of thin air when they make a loan. In exchange for a loan agreement, the commercial bank creates a corresponding bank deposit from nothing that the customer can then access as new money. This money, fiat currency, exists as commercial banks deposit and can be called broad money. Commercial banks hold reserve accounts with the central banks. These operate using a different type of fiat currency called central bank reserves, or base money. We cannot exchange base money, nor can non-bank businesses. Only commercial and central banks have access to base money. This creates what John Titus describes on his excellent Best Evidence channel as the split monetary circuit. And I cannot recommend John Titus. I know I've referenced him several times. I can't recommend his information enough. He's got a YouTube channel called Best Evidence. The link is in here in the article. He's got a lot of great information, and he's very talented at describing very complex things and putting them in a fashion that you can understand it. That's what I really liked about this article. I thought it was done really well. And Ian explained this whole thing very,
Yeah.
very well
Yeah,
for
very well.
common dummies like me. Prior to the pseudo pandemic, in theory, base money did not leak into the broad money circuit. Instead, increasing commercial banks' reserves supposedly encouraged them to lend more and thereby allegedly increase economic activity through some vague mechanism called stimulus. Following the global financial crash in 2008, which was caused by the commercial banks' pro- profligate speculation on worthless financial derivatives, the central banks bailed out the bankrupt commercial banks by buying their worthless asset securities with base money. The new base money, also created from nothing, remained accessible only to the commercial banks. That's when they used that big tarp. The tarp they used to cover up the dead bodies. That was the tarp. The new base money didn't directly create new broad money. That's when George Bush said, "We gotta." What did he say? I remember this. I was sitting on the couch, and I think we actually had TV and maybe
Wow.
watched TV.
Whoa.
And I remember
A long time
Brother
ago.
Bush saying, "We got to abandon free market principles to save the free market." And I was like,
What?
"Hey, wait a minute there, Georgie. If you abandon the free market principles, doesn't it cease to be a free market?"
Oh
I
man.
mean,
That's funny.
I'm just an everyday tater, but I'm a ham and egger. But I'm pretty sure that means that if you abandon free market principles, the free market ceases to be a free market. Much like Abraham Lincoln abandoned the democratic the republic and made it a tyrannical, more perfect union.
Yeah.
Following the global financial crash in 2008, okay, this all changed thanks to a plan presented to central banks by the global investment firm BlackRock. Oh, BlackRock. That name comes up a lot. In late 2019, the G7 central bankers endorsed BlackRock, suggested going direct monetary strategy. BlackRock said that the monetary conditions that prevailed as a result of the bank bailouts had left the international monetary and financial systems tapped out. Therefore, BlackRock suggested that a new approach would be needed in the next downturn if unusual circumstances arose. These circumstances would warrant unconventional monetary policy and unprecedented policy coordination. BlackRock opined. Going direct means the central bank finding ways to get central bank money directly in the hands of public and private sector spenders. Man, that almost kind of sounds like when Orange Man direct deposited funds directly into our bank account. Coincidentally, just a couple of months later, the precise unusual circumstances specified by BlackRock came about as an alleged consequence of the pseudo pandemic. The going direct plan was implemented. Instead of using base money to buy worthless assets solely from commercial banks, the central banks used the base money to create broad money. Deposits in commercial banks. The commercial banks acted as passive intermediaries, effectively enabling the central banks to buy assets from non banks. These non bank private corporations and financial institutions would have otherwise been unable to sell their bonds and other securities directly to the central banks because they can't trade using central bank base money. The U.S. Federal Reserve explained how they deployed BlackRock's going direct plan. A notable development in the U.S. banking system followed the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has been the rapid and sustained growth in aggregate banking deposits, broad money, when the Federal Reserve purchases securities from a non-bank seller. It creates new bank deposits by crediting the reserve account of the depository institution, base money, at which the non-bank seller has an account, and then the depository institution credits the deposit, broad money, account of the non-bank seller. And John Titus will show you how this is all done on his YouTube channel on the balance sheets. This process of central bank issuing currency that then finds its way directly into private hands will find its ultimate expression through CBDC. The transformation of the IMFS suggested by BlackRock Going Direct plan effectively served as a forerunner for the proposed CBDCs based IMFS, the essential CBDC public-private partnerships. That's a fancy word for fascism, okay? Public-private partnerships. CBDC, or technocratic oligarchy, or whatever you want to call it. It's got lots of fancy names. CBDC will only be issued by the central banks. All CBDC is base money. It will end the traditional split currency monetary system, although proponents of CBDC like to pretend that it won't, claiming the two-tier banking system will continue. This is nonsense. The new two-tier CBDC system is nothing like its more distant predecessor and much more like Going Direct. CBDC potentially cuts commercial banks out of the creating money from nothing scam. The need for some quid pro quo between the central and commercial banks was highlighted in a recent report by McKinsey and Company. The successful launch of CBDC involving direct consumer and business accounts could displace a material share of deposits currently held in commercial bank accounts and could create a new competitive front for payment solution providers. And this is where I'm curious of what these banks are thinking about this. This is literally going to cut out a lot of banks. It could be the end of the mom and pop local banks, unless they are devising ways to get involved in the parallel economy, which I do think that this is a viable thing, that these smaller local banks would want to get involved in these parallel local economies, as well as working together with bullion banks. 13 to 15 states now have issued their own bullion bank. Texas is one. I know Missouri recently has done that. So that's kind of exciting. There's potential there.
Yeah.
McKinsey also noted for CBDC to be successful, it would need to be widely adopted. So, a huge bank crash and a run on banks and a gigantic bank bailout and a massive loss of wealth that needed to be replenished would be a great time to institute, hey, we can just replenish the funds you lost in CBDC, but you just have to be on the system, and you just have to have your wallet, and you have to do all the stuff that we tell you to do, so that your wallet stays turned on. According to McKinsey, a thriving CBDC would need to replace existing instruments of payment. To achieve this, the private payment solution providers will have to be on board. Oh, you mean like PayPal and Venmo and Apple Pay and Google Pay? Everybody's gonna have to be on board. Everybody's gonna have to want to play ball. And we already know that these companies are all about it. Okay. So if they're going to countenance displacement of their material share of deposits, commercial banks need an incentive. Whatever model CBDC ultimately takes, if the central bankers want to minimize commercial resistance from existing alternatives, we can't have existing alternatives, because that's that's more like a free market. We have to eliminate the existing alternatives.
There can only be one.
There can only be one. It is a bad sci-fi movie. So-called public-private partnerships with the commercial banks is essential, though seeing as central banks are private corporations, perhaps corporate-private partnership would be more appropriate. McKinsey states, commercial banks will likely play a key role in large-scale CBDC rollouts, given their capabilities and knowledge of customer needs and habits. Commercial banks have the deepest capabilities in client onboarding, adoption of CBDC payment systems. So it seems likely that the success of a CBDC model will depend on a public-private partnership. PPP. Oh, what was that? There was PPP loans. Remember that? Between commercial and central banks. Accenture, the global IT consultancy, that is a founding member of the ID 2020 Alliance Global Digital Identity Partnership, agrees with McKinsey. Accenture declares, make no mistake, commercial banks have a pivotal role to play in a unique opportunity to shape the course of CBDC at its foundation. CBDC is developing at a much faster pace than that of other payment systems. In the U.S., at least, the design of CBDC will likely involve the private sector. And really, all that's happening with the quote unquote private sector moving into the public sphere, this is much like In-Q-Tel. Most of these are CIA and FBI and deep state cutouts. Most of these are DARPA. And really, all they are is they aren't a private company cooperating in the public sphere or cooperating with the government. They're a deep state government entity, government source, government funded deep state cutout that's pretending to be a private placement. And that's why all of this metadata gets shared. And that's why, that's why all this track and trace stuff, that's why all these tech companies play ball, because most of them are cutouts and most of their funding has come from DARPA, the deep state, the military industrial complex, the Department of Defense, and et al.
And doesn't CBDC play hand in glove with, how they're going to want to roll out a social credit score and things like that.
ID. Yep,
yeah, exactly.
All of it.
Because
they
couldn't do it with
you
can't do that
without it
with gold or silver or even with the dollar
with
bill,
any autonomy. It's too autonomous.
Exactly.
You can't track it. So there's a nice little chart here that shows you the Bank of International Settlements, central banks. Oh, look, WEF, CFR, Club of Rome, Chatham House, Rockefellers, IMF, United Nations, World Bank, World Health Organization. Oh, you got the Bill and Melinda Gates in there, Global Corps. You got non-governmental organizations, right? Then you got national governments. Then you got the propagandists and the hybrid warfare specialists. Exactly.
Oh, boy.
So there's a nice little chart there that's very accurate. What model of CBDC? By creating the new concept of wholesale CBDC, the two-tier fallacy can be maintained by those who think this matters. Nonetheless, it is true that a wholesale CBDC wouldn't necessarily supplant broad money. The Bank of International Settlements, the central bank for central banks, offers a definition of the wholesale CBDC variant. Wholesale CBDCs are for use by regulated financial institutions. They build on the current two-tier structure, which places the central bank at the foundation of the payment system while assigning customer-facing activities to PSPs, non-bank payment service providers. The central bank grants accounts to commercial banks and other PSPs, and domestic payments are settled on the central bank's balance sheet. Wholesale CBDCs and central bank reserves operate in a very similar way. And this is going to be how they're going to get these smaller banks to play ball. Oh, you're still involved and you still got to do this and all this stuff until until there's another cataclysmic event and we just have to circumvent all of this, and that's when they'll go straight around the banks, just like when Orange Man went right around everything and they deposited basic universal income into our checking accounts. By a conservative. We were all complaining that the Democratic guy that ran was going to be too progressive and all that stuff and touting basic universal income. And the conservative guy was the one that direct deposited the money directly into our checking account, just like the conservative guy was the whoop speed guy too. That's interesting too. And he still thinks that was a great idea. It was tremendous. It was huge and tremendous. Wholesale CBDC has, and he's the guy that's going to fix everything in 24. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be tremendous, y'all. Wholesale CBDC has some tenuous similarities to the current central bank reserve system, but depending on the added functionality of the CBDC design, increased central bank ability to control all investments, and subsequent business activity. This alone could have immense social impact. The BIS continues a more far-reaching innovation in the introduction of retail CBDCs. Retail CBDCs modify the conventional two-tier monetary system in that they make central bank digital money available to the general public, just as cash is available to the general public as a direct claim on the central bank. A retail CBDC is akin to a digital form of cash. Retail CBDCs come in two variants. One, well, don't be using those variants, man. That's scary. There's like flashbacks. All right.
PTSD.
One option makes for a cash-like design, allowing for so-called token-based access and anonymity in payments. Yeah, cool story, bro. This option would give individual users access to the CBDC based on a password-like digital signature using private public key cryptography without requiring personal identification, except for the people on the backside that know all that's in there. The other approach is built on verifying users' identity, account-based access, and would be rooted in a digital identity scheme. It's all a scheme. It is retail CBDC that extends central bank oversight and enables it to govern every aspect of our lives. Retail CBDC is the ultimate nightmare scenarios for us as individual citizens. Individual citizens, not global citizens. Hive mind of the world, unite. While the BIS outlines the basic concept of retail CBDC, it has thoroughly misled the public, suggesting that retail CBDC is the user's claim on the central bank. Sounds much better than the acknowledging that CBDC is a liability of the central bank. That is, the central bank always owns the CBDC. Who owns the Chiefs? Okay. It is a liability which, as we shall see, the central bank agrees to pay if its stipulated smart contract conditions are met. A retail CBDC is actually the central bank's claim on whatever is in your CBDC wallet. Wow, they claim what's in your wallet? What's in your wallet? It is a liability which, as we shall see, the central bank agrees to pay if its stipulated smart contract conditions are met. Okay, the BIS assertion that CBDC is akin to a digital form of cash is a lie. CBDC is nothing like cash, save in the most remotest possible sense. Both cash, as we understand it, and CBDC are liabilities of the central bank, but the comparison ends there. The central bank or its commercial bank partners cannot monitor where we exchange cash, nor control what we buy with it. CBDC will empower them to do both.
Yep.
At the moment, spending cash in a retail setting without biometric surveillance, such as facial recognition cameras, is automatically anonymous, while token-based access retail CBDC could theoretically maintain our anonymity. This is irrelevant because we are all being herded into a retail CBDC design that is rooted in a digital identity scheme. The UK Central Bank, Bank of England, has recently published its envisaged technical specification for its CBDC, which it deceptively calls the digital pound. The BOE categorically states CBDC would not be anonymous because the ability to identify and verify its users is needed to prevent financial crime and to meet applicable legal and regulatory obligations. Varying levels of identification would be accepted to ensure that CBDC is available for all. Users should be able to verify. I always get my Australian.
I know.
And British.
Yeah, British.
Users should be able to verify their privacy preferences to suit their privacy needs within the parameters set by law, the bank, and the government. Enhanced privacy functionality could result in users securing greater benefits from sharing their personal data. Oh, the more of your personal data you share, the more private it'll be. Yeah, cool story, bro. That sounds that sounds counterintuitive. Again, it is imperative to appreciate that CBDC is nothing like cash. Cash may be preferred by criminals, but it is more widely preferred by people who do not want to share all their personal data, simply conduct business, or buy goods and services. The digital pound will end the possibility for British people, just as CBDC in every other country will end it for their populations. The Bank of England model assumes no possible escape route, even for those unable to present state-approved papers on demand. Verifying levels of identification will be enforced to ensure that CBDC control grid is for all. The BOE, the executive branch of government, and the judiciary form a partnership that will determine the acceptable parameters of the BOEs, not the user's privacy preferences. The more personal identification data you share with the Bank of England and its state partners, the sweeter you're permitted to use the CBDC will be. The deeper you let them into your life and into your personal information and into your metadata and into your thermostat on your air conditioning unit and into all of it's crazy, man. That you'll get more it'll be easier to use and easier to use. And the more you let us into your life, it will be, it'll make it so much more easier and you'll have so much more flexibility. And they just tighten the rope around your neck.
So I think there will be people on here watching this. So, like, what do we have to do to, like, combat this CBDC? Like,
well, once again, we have to
do?
develop parallel community, parallel society, parallel economy. So, whatever that means to you and to your community. I mean, I believe that food is of a necessity.
Yeah, we all have to eat.
So we understand that we should be growing our food the best we can. We should be working within our community for those that can grow and can't grow and have other abilities we can work together as a barter, you know what I mean? So, and then the other thing you have to do is you have to be talking to your local banks and asking them how they see this and what their plans are to not just get squeezed out of the entire banking industry so that these global criminals can just like track and trace and control everybody. Because it certainly sounds like this is an end round for all these smaller banks. And obviously, if you don't play ball, they're going to turn you off. So
that's true.
So the solution is observe the masses and do the opposite. The solution is get out. Where's all this track and trace stuff? Where's all these facial recognition cameras? Right? Where is it?
This city.
It's in your cities. It's in your Babylon. It's in Babylonia, right? And it's at every traffic light. And even out in the country, it's at the traffic lights. But the thing you need to do first is get away from all that trash. Get out of the concrete jungle. You can't grow any food in the concrete jungle anyway.
Yeah.
And they're trying to force you into 15-minute cities. Get out of the cities. Get into the country. Get where there's some room to move around. Get to where there is some places that you won't be tracked and traced.
Yep.
And have facial recognition, right? And the intrinsic benefit to that is that you can have some dirt and you can plant. And the other intrinsic benefit to that is there are normal communities that aren't like just total like gulag, brainwashed, pink-haired propaganda, concrete trellises where everything is synthetic and the infrastructure is completely a derivative of some governmental agency. And whenever they flip the switch off, everybody's going to lose their mind, and when the next pandemic hits, they're going to weld everybody into their high rise, and say, well, yeah, you really can't go anywhere now because we just welded the bottom door shut. You know what I mean?
And that's why they're pushing the stupid electric cars too.
Exactly.
And that's, dude, did you see, okay, So there was like with the new Tesla cars that have been coming out, they've been purposefully putting actual cameras on the inside of the cars that like will watch you and everything.
Yeah.
But now Tesla just came out with their, we probably should do a reaction on it, but they just came out with a video saying like, because there was a lot of people like, dude, like, what are they doing with all of this data that they're harvesting from you? And then they made this, Tesla came out and made this cheesy video about like how safe your data is with
Yeah, it's such a
them.
joke.
And
Oh.
when they analyze the data from every Tesla car, they don't even know like what Tesla car they're, you know,
Right.
they know it, what maybe what model it is,
Cool
but not
story, bro.
who owns it or anything like that. Your data is safe and they don't even know who. Yeah,
And
it
it's
was
just
so
like
bogus.
these, all these all these cameras that are monitoring Amazon drivers and FedEx drivers and over the road truck drivers. It is
crazy.
getting mega invasive.
Yep.
And, you know, basically, and like with the truck driver video cameras on board, they're just forcing them out of the industry so that
Yep.
it'll be autonomous
Robots.
trucks.
Yep.
Yeah. They're just
Yep.
trying to squeeze the industry.
Exactly. Yep.
The more, okay, if we simply concede to the rollout of the CBDC, the concept of the free human being will be distant memory. Only the first couple of post-CBDC generations will have any appreciation of what happened. If they don't deal with it, the future CBD slavery of humanity will be inescapable. This may sound like hyperbole, but regrettably it isn't. It is the dictatorial nightmare of retail CBDC that we will explore in part 2, alongside simple steps
Daggum.
we can take to ensure CBDC nightmare never becomes a reality. So you can visit Ian's Substack and read part 2. We're not going to belabor that now. But we appreciate all y'all hanging out.
Yeah, and we weren't interacting with the chat because Dad was reading. So for the people that were saying, why aren't you interacting with the chat? We can actually see all of the messages here. So I was looking at them while Dad was talking too. So we can see y'all. And that's, we do live streams because it's one of the easiest ways for us to push out content because we don't have to like film it, record it, edit it, media encode it, and then upload it. It's kind of nice because it does it all at once.
Yeah.
So that's normally why we go live. So, but yeah, I just want to say thank you. Big thank you to everybody that's jumped on. We had Carlos.
Yeah, and this is a value for value proposition, so we always
Several other
encourage
people.
you to go to TheTexasBoys.com if you appreciate our content and what we're doing. We certainly hope you appreciate the incredible products that we offer you from our homestead to yours. Keep in mind that our merch ships separately, so if you're ordering honey and a t-shirt, the shirt will ship from the printer, which is printed here in the United States of America, and then the honey will ship from
like
us.
this shirt right here.
So
Boom.
Yeah, or Go Green, Compost the Globalist, or this cool hat. We are the CO2.
Yeah.
And the CBDC wants to eliminate the CO2, y'all. And they know that I'm wearing this hat, so I'm just saying.
That's awesome. All right. Thank y'all so much for jumping on and chilling out with us tonight. And
And we'll be on our backup channel
Yeah.
and on Rumble, obviously. We should be back on the main channel sometime next week.
And I think also what we're going to be doing too is from now on, we are going to be doing all the live streams on the backup channel. So then for everybody that's subscribed to the backup channel, that'll kind of be like the bonus that you'll have on the backup channel is that you get all of our live streams. And then we'll be reposting the live stream onto the main channel.
Yeah.
Because YouTube's just acting really weird with the main channel. And every time we go live, we lose like 20, 30 subscribers.
Yeah, or every time we post anything in general.
So
Whoa, there's some more dirt came out of my eye.
he got dirt in his eye.
Yeah, I was raking the fire and a huge bunch of dirt.
Was that from your other eye? Which eye?
No, it's from this eye. Yeah,
dang.
Yeah, well, that was crazy. Wow.
What in the world? Alrighty, y'all.
All right, y'all. Thanks for hanging out. We'll
Yep,
see
yep.
y'all in the next video.